Like, it was not that yet, but what am I good at? And I actually, unfortunately, had to do that soul searching when I was 31 years old instead of like 18 or 19 years old. I'm someone who wears color all the time. And I remember a few months before quitting, I was just wearing black head to toe. And I looked at myself in a mirror as I was getting ready to go to work. I don't know this person. Like, who is this person? It was hard. You don't forget that you're also, as an entrepreneur starting a project, you're also questioning your ability and is this the right thing? Maybe really not that many people need it. Like, the market was not ready for conversations as such. For them is that, why should I do that? I'm spending like $4,000 on a day of activity and it's a fun, team building activity, or it's a very fancy dinner. Like, why should I change that into a workshop talking about psychological safety?
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Making Your Mark podcast. I am your host, Mark Bundang, and today, as usual, I have a very special guest. Today, my guest is Nogol Madani. Hi, Nogol.
Hello. Thank you so much, Mark, for having me.
Good. I'm so happy to have you. Thank you so much for joining me today. A little bit for the audience in terms of how I know Nogol. We actually met through an interaction online on LinkedIn. There was actually you posted very clearly that you want to do some of these podcasts as well, get your word out, spread the gospel as you will. And then someone who I was trying to get as a guest said, "This person would be a good guest," and Mark has a podcast, so. And then, the rest is
Awesome. Yeah,
history, I
I
guess.
know. Like, the social world, it's interesting. Like, the digital world, like, there are lots of meaningful connections happening. And I'm so happy that we're here today exchanging and talking.
Good. Okay. So, you know what, Nogol, as usual, what I like to do is set the background a little bit for our audience. And so, what I would ask for you is, would you be able to share a little bit about your background and where you feel you've made your?
Yes. So basically, I'm a first generation immigrant. I'm Iranian. Came to Montreal in 2007 to pursue my graduate studies in engineering. And I worked as an engineer. Then I quit and I started a new career. And that's all the questions that you're going to ask me. So basically, I started my first career as an engineer, saw firsthand like the impacts of cultures, leadership, team dynamics. And I felt that there's more work to be done here. And that's where I decided to dedicate my time in my second career to change things and maybe make things better.
Okay, so let's get to a bit of your origin story a little bit, because it's an interesting thing that I mean, full disclosure, we always prepare for these kind of interviews, so we've kind of had a previous discussion before. What I find interesting is there is a bit of I have Iranian friends myself, and I know that there's a bit of a stereotype in terms of you start out as an engineer or a doctor or a lawyer or something like that. You went the engineer route.
Yes.
Was that something of choice for you at the time, or did you feel the pressure from a family or culture to do it?
I'm coming from an engineering family, but no, my dad was so against it. I said, don't go into engineering for sure. He said, like, study sociology, do something else, but don't do engineering. So no, there was no pressure, but at the same time, I loved human science and social science, and I loved literature and I loved history. But back then, we're talking about, like, I'm 41 years old, so we're talking about like 21, like 23 years ago. Back in Iran, there were not that many options in terms of, okay, you study history, what's next? You study literature, what's next? So I think that was one thing that I couldn't envision a different future. Plus, my dad had an engineering firm. He was an electrical engineer. And my brother was already working with him as an engineer. So I think that deep down, there was no idea of immigration. There was none of those thoughts. And I thought that maybe down the road, I will actually join that firm so that maybe an engineering background could help. But I wouldn't say that it was, I mean, I liked it and I enjoyed it. I was good at math and chemistry and like physics, but definitely it was not necessarily what I was born to do. But again, that's the other thing that happens, I think, for you're also Iranian friends, is that when you're a good kid, when you're a good student, usually they push you into these three areas. Like it's really rarely happens that you're an amazing student and then you go into literature or like sociology,
Yeah.
unless you're extremely passionate about. This is not necessarily a common thread. Said, okay, you're good at this, then you do med. You're good at human science, then you do law. You're good at math, then you do engineering. Like this is actually like the structure. And I think I didn't also have that passion necessarily uncovered or unlocked for myself to really make those choices. So I somehow followed that path, like considering different opportunities out there.
One thing I do have in terms of a common thread amongst guests is a lot of them do a degree, but don't necessarily know enough about themselves. You know, like did you? I mean, you had some notions about you like social science, you like those uh, those kind of areas or disciplines, but did you know yourself well or?
No, no, not at all. Like, I think that uh, I always say that, self awareness is one of the most important things, especially if you're starting a career. And I think that you pay a huge price when you don't know yourself because you're starting a career, you invest in things, you go through like certain years of like building a career out of something, and then you say, oh, this is not the right one. I knew that, what I was good at, what I could do, but I don't think that I thought I could leverage what I was good at. For me, my mind was that you study, you go to a job, you learn things, you get better, and you progress. Like it was not that, yeah, but what am I good at? Like there are certain things that I can leverage maybe. Like this was not something there. And I actually, unfortunately, had to do that soul searching when I was 31 years old instead of like 18 or 19 years old. So yeah, so I think this is one of my learning, and I want to make sure for my kid that what, just go explore, do things, make mistakes, but just figure out where you're landing and what is the place that you feel a bit more comfortable.
Wow. The more you reveal your story, the more it sounds similar to mine.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, just a bit of a background myself. Like I studied chemistry, and then because I was good at it, not because I was necessarily passionate about it. And then when I went into the real world and I got a chemistry job, I was like, I spent most of my time trying to figure out how to go to something else. You know, what
Yeah.
is it that I wanted? And
Yeah.
it took me also 6 years to land my first one. So around 29, 30, that's when I
Yes.
landed in, oh, now I have a sense of self,
Yes, exactly. And for me, I have to say that even though I was not necessarily in love with the industry I worked at or with engineering itself, I was enjoying work. I think another reason that really pushed me towards like career change was also the culture and the people and the dynamics that I like worked with. Because to your point, like you can start as an engineer and in a few years you think that okay, I have more leadership skills, I have more people skills. So you just, switch within an industry. And it's very interesting, Mark. I had a first manager that I had out of out of university, out of my master's. He was someone who was, we call them like facilitative leaders. Like he was someone who would see potential. He actually gave me a new title, like deputy engineering manager. He took 3 weeks off during the summer. I was actually taking care of all the deliveries. I was 27 because I was like, I've done my master's, so I was not that young, but it was just 5 months that I was in that job. And then fast forward, I actually worked under leaderships that they were extremely directive. They didn't unlock any potential. And I saw myself slowly getting into the corner. So I'm constantly thinking that, there are things that you can control when you're like thinking about your career, but there are things that they're out of your control. I'm thinking that if I continue to work with that like leader, maybe I would have stayed and I would have grown into like an interesting person, mixture of engineering, leadership skills, human skills. But then it didn't stay, and it really pushed me into this quite miserable, I would say, individual the last few months that I was working as an engineer. Because, again, I think that there are different moments that even if it's not the best opportunities, you can get something out of it and you can grow in it. And I really pushed myself into it, and it didn't work out finally. And it was, I think, because of the environment.
Okay. And how long did you work as an engineer?
I worked for close to 6 years as well. Yeah.
Okay. And then I guess there was actually let me dig into those 5 years because I think that's going to set
Yes.
the stage for what's to come. So in those 5 years, you graduate. You graduated a master's degree, was it?
Yes. A
A
master's in
master's degree.
engineering.
And then after that, you worked in the field. You got a job. You worked in the field, and then were the first few years something where you were enjoying engineering?
I mean, the first job that I got, it was in a very international, like big construction company. And as I said, like my first manager, first like boss or leader, he was like the first 6 months, it was amazing. But the challenge was that I was working at mining industry. And in mining industry, what happens is that there are many different, we call them pre-feasibility projects. Like they're $1 million projects that you want to see if this like mine, we can do something with it. And we're talking about $1 billion projects. The majority of them, they're not going to happen because that's the whole point. Like 80% of these studies, they stay at a study level. So I ended up working for different leaders. Like this first leader, it was amazing. The second one was awful. The third one. So I would stay in that company for 2 years, but every 6 months, there were different projects and different studies. So I moved around, and I would say that the first 6 months was the best. I thought, there's someone who's seeing exactly what I was not seeing at the time, that I'm good at bringing people together, really like holding people accountable, but in a very human way. Like I was really capable of leading. But then after that, obviously, I went back into this junior engineering role. And then after 2 years, the company decided to close its door in Montreal. And so basically, they just like, we had to either go into different cities, which I didn't want to move. I just tried to establish in Montreal. So basically, like all of us were just let go. And I just started then, like 2 months after, I started to work for a small consulting firm. Like the first one was this extremely huge construction firm, like 50,000 people. The second one was like 20 people. I would say that it was bad. That one, it was the idea that no one saw those potentials. And it was a very directive kind of leadership. You do this, you deliver this, you do that. And the owners, they were extremely like controlling in meetings. You're not allowed to talk. Like, back then I didn't know the words to put it, but I remember, and they would make comments, it was not really psychologically safe. They would comments about my outfit because I was one of like the only woman engineer. And I think one out of two, like I think the administration was also a lady. So a lot of comments to the point that I remember, I'm someone who wears color all the time. And I remember a few months before quitting, I was just wearing black head to toe. It was in winter, like black turtleneck, black pants, and black boots. And I looked at myself in a mirror as I was getting ready to go to work. I don't know this person. Like, who is this person? But I really wanted to make myself invisible just so that I can go and sit and do my work with no comments whatsoever. And that for me was a turning point. I said, I'm losing myself. Like, this is just literally a definition of losing yourself, that you're not just being even able to express yourself through what you wear or like how you show up in the workplace. So that was the, the turning point for me to just quit completely. And
Did you
also,
realize this was happening at the time?
yes, for sure, for sure. And I already actually 6 months before that, I've already started to read about culture, read about engagement. Like I started my research basically like back in 2015, because I think that I got to the point that on the paper, everything was really nice. So I said, okay, like I'm having a good job. I just got married that summer. And then like, nice car, nice home, like travels, but I was miserable inside. And I said, okay, it looks like this is not a right path. So we have to rethink it and reinvent it. So I started to read a lot about culture, about engagement, what's the challenge, what's happening with me, can I do anything? And I even tried to make some small changes within that system. But then at some point for me, it was clear that it's not going to happen. But at the same time, it really built that fire in me that like there's a world of people out there like me feeling disengaged, feeling that they want to like build better cultures, do things differently. So I decided to dedicate my time to build a project around that.
Okay. And in those 5 years, from what you just recalled, it seems like you upfront you had a fairly good experience. And then so you kind of knew what good was. And then you
Yeah,
went
for sure.
into
And it just went down. Yeah. But at the same time, I have to say that there's a big difference, Mark. Like I see that there's so many people that say that, oh no, but we're performing well. I performed extremely well till the last second. And I was getting prizes and bonuses. Like I think there is a huge difference between performing and unlocking your potential. There's one thing that you're good at delivering things. There's another thing that you think that more to offer. And I cannot really get there. So I think that all these 5 years, I was a very good worker, doing the work, like, finishing the job, delivering with good quality. That was not a challenge at all. It was just this idea that I can do more and I'm not given a chance.
and this was at the firm with 20 people. Is that
Both of them actually towards the other one as well. Yeah, both of them I think towards the end. Because it's really, because, I think that it really depends on leadership to see that, to understand that, I think a good leader is a good leader that can understand people, what they're capable of, give them a bit of like, accountability and responsibility. And some do it and some don't. Some searching for workers and doers, some searching for collaborators and partners. And I think that except my first 6 months, like all the other leaders, they were more into, we just need you to do this and to deliver. That's it.
Mm. And do you find that there's a correlation between like smaller firms, large firms, big firms for that?
No, I would say that, because for me, even though this was a huge organization, the first one that I worked with, I still worked with 20 people, 30 people. The only difference I would say that between large organizations and small firms is that in large organizations, there are systems in place when it comes to HR, when it comes to culture, there are like certain baseline. Whereas in the smaller ones, it's really the behaviors and practices of the owners of the company. And that's why for me, like talking a lot to like, startup people say that you are setting the tone for the culture. You're setting, the culture. So that was the unfortunate part for the second one because the owners were not necessarily that much tuned or that much aware of like certain practices that needed to be in place. But at the same time, you can go into a small firm that, I work with a lot of like small, medium firms that they're doing amazing work and they're extremely intentional. But it gets become a bit kind of a luck because you're just either lucky or not because it's just the question of intuition of leaders because the system is not in place, whereas in large organizations the systems are in place. Then again, it's a question of what is the environment, small environment that you're interacting every day and the leader that you work
Mm-mm. So even within those large organizations, there are micro environments that can
with. Oh, for sure,
determine the
definitely. Yes,
direction.
for sure, definitely.
Okay. So I want to go to the part where the turning point for you, where you decided it's probably towards the end of that 5 year tenure where you were an
Yes.
engineer.
So
Yes.
basically, it's in 2016, I quit my job. And this time, I think that I was someone who would do this. I wouldn't take the time to reflect. This time I gave myself a few months for reflection. I finally said, you know what, like maybe instead of doing, like maybe we have to sit back and just be for a while to understand what you're after. Because, for me, again, my challenge was that to become successful in it, but feel miserable internally. So for me, it was really this idea that I need to do something that makes sense, that makes me happy, that it's aligned with my values. So I started the project of Glee Factor in 2017. At the beginning, the idea was that I just want to see a different world. I want to not only see a different kind of leadership and culture, but I want to expose people also to it. So I started with a series of tea conferences, bringing people together, inviting leaders. Then I started to do like some workshops. And it was in 2018 that, I still didn't know, even though I was reading like, I don't know, 50 books every year back then. And I was really trying to, and I had my personal experience. I still couldn't understand what was the core of the work. I thought it was inclusion, social wellness, like the words they were coming. They were up and coming back then, we're talking about like 9 years ago, but I still couldn't like really pinpoint. So I reached out to all the professors and PhD people in Montreal in social science, organizational behavior, anything and I in human system intervention. And I said, I need work. I need help. I just think that this is my experience. This is what I think. It has to be something not individually, but collectively. I don't know if it's inclusion, if it's social wellness, but it's got to do something with an environment. And there was this PhD candidate. Now she's a professor in Alberta, but she just, answered back and said, I'm going to help you out. So we actually just did like a collaboration together. And I just like won a grant, and I just did like a few months of contract with her, and she came back with the answer of psychological safety, what you were missing. And it looks like what is at the core of inclusion and all of that is psychological safety. So basically that was a turning point for us within the project, that okay, like if I'm whatever I'm doing, if it's workshop, if it's learning experiences, if it's conferences, we have to come back to this, because this is the missing piece that is extremely important. So we slowly built and evolved in that project.
So for the audience, and I don't want to deviate away from your story, your personal story too much, but for those of us who are not well versed
Familiar,
in
yeah.
it, what is psychological safety?
Psychological safety is exactly, Mark, that feeling that you're sitting in a meeting and you think that I can share my idea. I can actually disagree. I can speak up. I can participate and contribute. I can say that I don't know or I made a mistake. It's basically an environment where everyone feels safe to take interpersonal risks. These are all interpersonal risks. We are like social species. We don't want to seem bad. We don't want to seem incompetent. We don't want to have conflict with other people. But all of this means that we are somehow affecting our performance as an individual and as a collective. Because if you're not asking for help, you're not doing an amazing job. If you're not sharing the mistake, we're missing on the opportunity of learning. If you're not sharing your idea, maybe that's the answer and that's a solution. So the idea is that how can we create a climate where people feel safe to contribute, to share their voice, to take risks, so that we can create a learning environment, but also like an environment where we can perform and transform. Contradictory to what so many people the minute we say psychological safety, they think like a safe space, too comfortable, not really, not really like a challenging. It's exactly the opposite. It's really a climate where you can disagree, where you can give feedback, but it's always in a trusting like path, respect, no judgment, and no shame. And that's where, we can definitely create that environment for learning and exchanges and doing work together.
Mm. So, how is it different from, say, something like inclusion or equity or that kind of stuff?
Inclusion is a personal thing. Like, you feel included when you can. Actually, when we talk about psychological safety, there's like a research around 4 stages of psychological safety. The first stage is inclusion safety, meaning that I just feel belonged. I can be part of I can bring my authentic self to the work. I can be who I am. Either I'm a minority with my background or anything. This is just the base level. But then there are so many people that might feel included, but they don't feel comfortable to challenge the status quo, to tell the leader that this is not, the right thing to do, or this is not the path to go. So there is one level that I feel included so that I can speak up. There's a second level is that I feel I can actually take risks and I can learn and I can collaborate. The third thing is that I can give feedback, I can contribute. And finally is that I can challenge the status quo. And, the risk level goes further up. So it's really around designing conversations and designing an environment that not only people feel included, but they can basically participate as well and they can contribute. It's just like these are I would say that it's a bit more practical and actionable to compared to diversity and inclusion, because those are just kind of like a cultural, the first one, I would say that it's more of a policy making. When we're talking about diversity, inclusion is more like a culture thing, that we are inviting people to come together and we are celebrating differences. But the third level, I would say that psychological safety is really around that environment that you create where certain practices can take place.
Okay. And now going back to your story.
Yes, it's amazing.
So this is you you started the project around 2017, is that correct?
Yes. And this
Okay.
was 2018 around psychological safety. And I started to reach out to leaders and I said, guys, this is the answer. Psychological safety is the answer. I have to say that it's not a good term in general, because the minute that you say psychological safety, they think of physical safety and, we don't have harassment, so then we have psychological safety. Or they think about the psychological part of it, so they think of well-being, the wellness. But back in 2019, this is at the beginning of it, I reached out to many leaders and I sat down with them. The traditional ones would say that people are not supposed to be happy. People are supposed to make money. People don't need to feel safe. This was one approach. And then I would go to startup people and they would say more of we have an amazing culture. We have ping pong tables. We have free hot dog and beer on Friday. So that was I realized that, okay, the market is really not ready for these concepts. The idea of culture was this, it was just a wrong definition of culture. It was all around social initiatives. And then psychological safety, inclusion, diversity, they were just lip services, nice words. And then COVID hit, and obviously everything changed. Yes.
I do. I before we get to COVID, actually, this is because I'm so interested in the origin story of your project.
Yeah.
Before it was converted into something much bigger,
Yes.
right? So I find it very interesting because in my mind as well, my own background is project management. Actually, I was a chemist first, then I became a project manager, then a business transformation person as well in 2013. And things like change management, around the same time that you're talking about this psychological safety term, I had a major project to transform part of the business that I was in 2018, 2019. So part of it was trying to show them not only what the theory was on it, but also in practice, what does that mean? And then how do you get them to And it's so funny because like I was working in a mining equipment company. So it's kind
Oh
of,
my goodness. Yes.
yeah, yeah. So like traditionally it's very authoritarian, very hierarchical. And so these concepts, even when you walk them through it, they they're like, well, I don't want to do that. Like I'm the boss,
Exactly.
or like shouldn't they, like exactly what you said. Oh, shouldn't, like they're not here for that,
No, no.
So
The
how
willingness is not
how
there. Yeah.
yeah, what was it like being in rooms and in conversations around 27 and 2018 for you?
It was hard. I would say that it was because, don't forget that you're also, as an entrepreneur starting a project, you're also questioning your ability and is this the right thing? Maybe really not that many people need it. But it's interesting, the idea around psychological safety, like it's been in academic like since the 50s, and then in 90s, like 1999 it was like in Harvard, like it was like written an article, like Amy Emerson wrote an article. It was not until 2016 that Google actually shared a very famous like project, the Aristotle project, that they want to understand why some of their teams are performing like better than the other, that the research came out and the first reason or the metric was psychological safety. So it started coming to the business world. But it's just the idea of like they're nice to have, so it was always this idea that the leadership as it was working, you know, and people, even though they saw that things are not as optimum as it could be, but the bottom line is working, the profit is there. So why should we change it? Like, I think this is the mentality that it's working. Why should we fix it? But then I think so that those are very hard conversations because you showcase studies, research, numbers. But if there is not that willingness for change, we always say that for change, you need willingness, readiness, and capacity. I think that, so many of these people don't have that capacity because they're just like delivering, delivering, delivering. But the majority of time, it's the question of readiness. Like the market was not ready for conversations as such. And the reason to their to defending them, to their defense, is that they didn't know the impact of it. For them is that, why should I do that? I'm spending like $4,000 on a day of activity, and it's a fun, team building activity, or it's a very fancy dinner. Like, why should I change that into a workshop talking about psychological safety? And I think COVID really changed that, because then it got all those social elements and initiatives out of people.
Mm.
There was no other team building for a while. And people finally understood that, okay, like it's not about the beer or the hot dog. It's about how we can interact with each other. What is our capacity for collaboration? How can we invite participation if we're sitting at home? Like, so they finally got that, okay, when we're talking about culture, we just got it wrong. And that was, I think, the pivotal moment for many leaders and many team dynamics. I would not say that it's still like an epiphany moment for everyone, but I think they just challenged people to think out of their typical solution for team dynamics and for culture and leadership development.
So before COVID, like things were working, even though they weren't
Yes.
optimal. That's what you mentioned, right? So why do I need to change?
Yeah,
If what
exactly.
I'm doing is bringing the results that I can live with, and even get a bonus on,
Yes.
right? And then something with COVID took an element of that away, so that it's no longer working.
Yes.
Uh, and what is it that COVID took away?
I think all those serendipitous connections that happen just because we're in the same physical space. There was no more hallway conversations. There were no more sitting around a corner and going to a lunch. Like, I think that there is this definitely being together, create connection, but none of them were designed, or they were not intentional, you know? They were just like, okay, we're going to go grab a lunch and we're just going to, none of that could happen. So I think that for the first time, teams and leaders had to be intentionally build connections, intentionally improve team dynamics, intentionally design conversations so that they can collaborate better together. And that's where that idea came at, okay, like we need to spend time and invest money and really like work on this rather than just take the opportunity and just go for lunch or just do a team building activity, because we cannot do that anymore. So I think that intentionality around, we need to build our culture, we need to build our dynamics. As a leader, I'm responsible for creating those connections and interactions. I think that was like a pivotal moment for many teams and many organizations.
That is so interesting because now with intention, so the difference between serendipity and intention is, with intention, you have to know what you're intending. You have to know what you're looking for, like what goes into what you're looking for.
Exactly.
Whereas serendipity is really just, it happened by accident. Just, I don't
Exactly.
know how it works. It's just this formula works, right?
Works.
Like,
exactly. You know, we're going like for a happy hour, like this is just working. And we get to see that people are, and then they tried what they've done actually many teams during COVID, which was wrong, was that they tried to imitate those serendipitous moments online and virtually. And obviously that was like a big failure, because then you're just at home with your kids. You don't want to join a virtual happy hour and drink a beer and connect with people. So I think that it was more like, okay, then what do we need to do? What are we missing? And what are we even trying to build? Like, I think that what was the intention of doing all of this? Because it was not just people having fun. It was about building that trust, improving those dynamics so that people within those dynamics can bring their best work. So again, then I think that there was that willingness and that forced readiness for people to just say, okay, maybe we can build this a bit differently and more systematically. And that was the moment that I got a chance to just say, okay, now let's talk about psychological safety and see how it works and how we can practice it. You know, because there's one thing around knowing what psychological safety means. And to this date, after like all these years and COVID and everything, still 45% of leaders know what it is and why it's important, but only 26% of them know how to implement it. Because, you know, we always give this example and said, everyone knows they have to eat healthy and everyone knows that they have to go and do an exercise. But the wellness industry is still $1 billion industry because the knowledge is not the same as application. You know, it's not the same thing as doing it. And it's the same thing within dynamics and within cultures and between leaders. Like, you know that this is important, but you just don't have the capacity or you don't know how to implement it. And that's where I could finally turn the project into a business model, basically, and say, okay, now we can help you out, I guess.
that was going to be my next question. How did it
Yes.
convert? So, first of all, what did the project look like versus what a business looks like for you?
Yes. The project, I would say that I really had that research hat. I was really open to experimentation, trying different avenues, learning, collaborating. And then I would say towards 2019, it was getting shape in terms of, okay, this is around workshops, but workshops and programs and learning experiences. But they were extremely production heavy. We wanted to make sure that it's, you know, different, that it really allow people to think outside of the box. But one thing that happened for us is that one day on March 10th, I couldn't do any of these productions within companies. So everything had to go online. So it was really more about, okay, how can we create a similar experience of connection, of experiential aspect, of interaction and reflection, but online? That is a bit different. So it's really pushed me to think outside of the box in terms of becoming really better facilitators and better experiential learning designers. So this was the first like big difference. And I invested a lot of time working with other people, myself becoming better at designing learning that has content in it, but just the experience itself, it allows people to feel psychologically safe. Because, there is one thing for people to give them theory, but there is another thing that they experience it. And I said, oh, now I know what it means. Now I know how it feels and what's the impact. So now I want to do it. So this is basically the first challenge that I had back in 2020 and 2021, that I said that I want this work not to be theoretical, to be extremely experiential and practical. And that had to come off through the program and through the design itself.
Okay. So that's the difference between the project and the business that you have now.
Yeah, I mean the project, and I said, and the other thing, the projects, the business slowly also like went after the business models that could work. Like it was the question of when we were getting feedback. Now we're just getting feedback from people. For example, we would give 2 workshops, and we say, "This is what you need to do. This is what you need to change," and they would come and say, "But we still don't know what to do." So I've realized how much hand holding it's needed for the process of change, and for this mindset shift and for these new practices. So then we turned our workshops into long-term programs, different support. And then like I started that, okay, but then some people are not ready for that long-term commitment. So what could be a fire starter workshop, like just a learning opportunity to just somehow ignite things. So it's really thinking about our clients. I think that the big difference between business and project is that you're constantly thinking about your clients, you're constantly thinking about your audience, and you really are empathetic towards them and understand where they're at and what are the different values that you can add them in different times, and meeting where they're at. If they're ready just for a small piece of education, that's where they're meeting. If they're ready for a long-term commitment, that's where we're meeting them. If they're ready to do something online with no like interaction whatsoever, because this is too risky, this is where we're meeting them. So it's really around where people are at and how can we serve them and how can we support them in this journey.
That's so fascinating because I'm trying to place there's that formal part where the business actually has a birth certificate and it says,
Yes.
it was born at this time.
Yes.
But what I love about hearing you recall this is that it's iterative, it's very much like I'm writing as I go along.
Well, for sure. It's an evolution. It's an evolution because that was the moment that I started to interact with clients. I would say that in the first few years, definitely there were a few clients that I worked with, and we always told that this is a pilot project. So we would get feedback from them. But now slowly after COVID, we're just thinking about, okay, we're getting feedback. This is what they're saying that we need. So we need to actually provide it. And sometimes they're asking things that it's not what you want to do, or it's not what you're capable of doing. So it's also, again, constantly going back to yourself, really going into your own niche of what you are capable of doing and being very honest about it. There were at the beginning, you do coaching, you do this, you do one workshop, we're going to do it. But then at some point it said, this is what we're doing and this is how we can help you. And if you need that, you could contact this person, this person, this person, but this is not what we're doing. So really not just being born, but somehow really just growing up, becoming an adult and be very clear about what you do. That also, I think it was just this evolution that you need to give it a chance.
And the people around the project versus the people around the business, like who worked on the project and who works in the business?
Yeah. The business, I would say that the project were more researchers, like more collaborators. Let's do like a partnership event together. And there were also some doers to help me like implement certain projects. When it come into business, I created my own advisory board because it's business. So I need someone to help me with marketing. I need someone to help me with business strategy and sales. And then there were contractors that help me implement. And then there are designers who are contractors that help me build. So it's really around the idea that what do I want to build? What's the product? What's the marketing and sales around it? And what's the delivery look like? Looks like how you're going to develop and implement it. So it has the operational piece, it has a product design or service design piece, and then it has all the business side, which is the marketing and sales piece. So all of that, for me, I think that you also, as an entrepreneur, as a business person or self-employed, you just also have different postures and you evolve within that posture.
Mm. On the, I guess, on the structure side of the business that you're speaking to, how much of that did you know before you got into this?
Thank you so much for this question. I think, and I'm not proud of it. I'm saying, Mark, so that your audience take a different path. I think that it's extremely hard to start a business when you don't know much about business and you don't know much about the industry you're entering. So many people, they're amazing marketing people and they start their own agents. They're great change managers within like systems and organizations and say, you know what, I want to become a consultant myself. That's different. At least you know the craft. So then you need to understand the business side of things. But learning the craft at the same time as building the business, I think it's a big project. And I think it creates a lot of pressure because you are expecting a business to feed your family as you are refining your craft. I would suggest, I think sometimes that it would have been better if like I gave myself those few years of like project thing and I was like living off on grants and everything. But maybe I could work for like a small startup or more like a small consultant, someone that was doing something similar, not exactly the same, but just a few years ahead of me. So I could learn all those things instead of just hitting the wall, learning. It was just all based on experience. But the other thing is that I love the idea what I was doing that it was right was like surrounding myself with advisors and with people that they've done it, they've built $1 million projects. So they would tell me that, no, don't do this. This is the path forward. I had that like sounding board constantly, but it was, I would say, a lot of things to juggle and a lot of things to put together. And I wouldn't necessarily recommend that because I think it just creates a lot of pressure. And I think, it's just, I always say that it's just like expecting a 9-month-old to speak and to run and to like, it's just like, things have their own timelines and you can't necessarily push them and pressure them. But it's an unrealistic expectation that I think would pressure on your project, on your idea, on your purpose, and on yourself.
And I imagine that the way that you did it, I mean, any business that you start up requires a lot of time, but the way that you did it, it sounds like there were some sacrifices you might have had to make or some trade-offs.
Yeah, for sure. Definitely. Yes, definitely. And I think that, and now looking back at it, you just think that, like, obviously you're just giving your time, you're giving so many things, but what would be a better way or more efficient way? Should I have just learned everything through experience and doing it myself and seeing like the result? Or I could just get that through like a residency or like an internship. Again, I'm extremely still happy because I have so many friends that they don't even surround themselves with other like, experienced people. Like I still I have that mentality of collaboration and, learning from others and collective intelligence. So I think that was at least like a good thing that I've done. But definitely, again, like refining your craft and refining your business at the same time, like that could take long.
Okay. Well, you're here now, right? So I'm
Oh
assuming
yeah, for sure. Yes, everything's good now. Yeah, we're out of the woods. Yeah.
out of the woods. Perfect. Good, good. I do want to ask you from this experience, like you emerged out of COVID. Now it's 2026. It's 4 years, or depending on how you count the end of COVID.
Yes.
So you kind of establish your business, and so what's ahead, or what are you looking
Yeah.
forward to now?
Yeah. So, one thing that happened in the last few years was that I was always thinking about psychological safety as a tool to perform, to help people perform, collaborate, contribute, and help leaders really get the best out of their people and people feeling like safe and seen within their systems. But then it was 2023 and like 24 was just like ChatGPT, AI. And don't forget that, back in 2015, when I was reading and doing my research, still working as an engineer, it was around the future of work, 2030, be a very different year. Like all of these conversations, the new generation of workforce, like emerging, which back then they were talking about millennials. Now, obviously, we have Gen Z in the market. So all of that, I was reading about it, but now it was happening. And at the same time, we talked about this. I have a small kid that has to go to school, and I'm reading a lot about the future of work and what's important, and like what people need to learn, because all the technical stuff is going to be done by machines. So I became quite interested to understand what is the impact of psychological safety, or how this is going to evolve in the next few years. And that's where I read a lot about facilitative leadership and how psychological safety can really help you bring people together, tap into collective intelligence, and facilitate change. Because, we are going through that phase that finally those old leadership mindset won't work anymore. I would even argue that still so many people dragged like the old ideas into COVID and after that. But now it's a question that we have like AI agents going to be working with us in in a year or two. So the question is that, okay, what is my role? And I started, and for me, this became quite interesting concept. And I said, okay, this is a moment to support leaders. So instead of just working with teams, now we're focusing on leadership development and also really helping them to change identity. That you don't need to have all the answers. You don't need to be the authority. You don't need to be in control. You don't need to have certainty, because no one has. But what you need is to create that psychological safety so new ideas emerge. Because this is where we're at when we're talking about change and transformation. You want people to come share their ideas. You want to listen. You want to make sense of things. One thing that everyone says, that a good leader now is a good leader. It's a leader that can sense, put things together, connect the dots, and be really good at making sense of everything that's happening within uncertainty. So that has been, and then the importance of human skills and social skills, and then last year I started a series of conversations like yours on LinkedIn Live, and I actually talked to many like people that they're like scholars or founders or thinkers in the AI world. And I asked them this question. I said, okay, what do people need to do now? Like, what is going to be like, if our jobs are going to be replaced with what we qualified for decades studying, then what is our role? And there was this Harvard business, school professor that mentioned human capacity, and human assets. So that also confirmed this idea that, again, how we influence, how we collaborate, how we create an environment for our teams, how you your analytical thinking, your creative thinking, how you can create an opportunity for experimentation this is going to be your differentiator. So this somehow solidified our like model and our work into a future where we are supporting leaders most of the time, middle managers, to really help them build capacity, not only to perform, but also to transform. And I'm super excited about it because I know that this is exactly the same things that my son has to learn through his school and within the system so that he can, add value and differentiate himself in 10 years or in 15 years when he has to work.
How old is your son?
He's going to be 5 soon. So he's going to start like a kindergarten next year.
Goodness.
Yeah.
Hopefully there's already a carved out path to this by the time he gets there. But
yes, I think so. And I think that, it's scary for so many people, AI in the future of work, but I just see it as a great opportunity that humans finally can be humans. We were asked to be machines for centuries, like post-industrialization, but I just think that now that we're going to have machines working with us, this is the opportunity to actually tap into our human potentials. And I really want to support leaders doing that.
I have a question to ask you regarding this,
For sure.
because one of my other guests that I interviewed this season, he said something about AI. An engineering manager from another firm told him this. He says, listen, people shouldn't be afraid of AI. They should be afraid of people who know how to work with AI. What do you think about that?
I totally agree. I totally agree, actually, that I think that the future will belong to people who have AI literacy and fluency, meaning that they know how to work with technology. They're not running away from it, combined with their human skills and social skills and leadership skills. And when you combine that, they're the ones who are going to thrive in the years to come. I don't think that, and I'm talking to a lot of, as I said, I interviewed many people. We're talking about 87,000 jobs or 87 million jobs are going to be demolished with AI, but then 96 million jobs going to be worn out of it. So it's just the question of reskilling, upskilling. And I think that, and also really changing that mindset that how can I reinvent myself so that I can stay relevant? And I would say that human skills, social skills, again, your capacity, we call it facilitative leadership because as facilitators, this is what we do. You bringing people together, tapping into collective intelligence, create an environment where it's safe for people to contribute and collaborate, experiment, take risks, discussing mistakes, failures. This is the path forward for the years.
You mentioned a very good word, reinvent. How do people who identify this is what I do, and then they see that they can't reconcile that AI can be a part of that, or that they might have to deviate significantly away from what they currently do? How do they overcome, I guess, that apprehension to AI?
Yes. So, yeah. There's something we call it it's FOBO, the fear of becoming obsolete. Everyone says that social media is all about FOMO and fear of missing out. This one is all about, am I going to be relevant in years to come? One of the people that I actually interviewed, Mark, last year said something that stayed with me. It said that people have to have agency now. You have to be extremely agile in terms of learning AI, learning the skills that you need, understanding what you can leverage, really doing the work. Definitely there are some organizations that they're helping you reskilling yourself, upskilling yourself, putting you in different positions, but that might not be the case for many people. I think that the agency is really on individuals and I think that, when we use the word reinvention, and I went through that and I think I made a mistake. I think that so many of us would think that reinvention is demolishing and starting from scratch, whereas in the process of reinvention, you can use a lot, you can leverage a lot of what you have. It's just a question of repositioning and building up on something on the base and on the foundation that you already have. So I guess with that mindset, what are some of the skill sets that you have? What are some of the things you need to learn? What are the things that you can leverage? and like what are the paths to move forward. And really, like I tell that to all my friends who work in organizations, I said, just go take courses, like be really like agile about it, have that agency, don't wait and sit there, like do the things that you need to do in order to learn and in order to just, develop yourself.
I mean, even just go on to the to one of these chat GPTs or Gemini.
Sure, definitely, just as a starting point. Yeah, I was one of the ones that actually I was very like, oh no, no. And now it's like, it's basically an assistant. It knows basically the design of things, it knows everything, it knows the language of the project, and it's really supporting. Again, you want to constantly keep that authenticity and the work that you're doing. So that's where I think that the creativity, the judgment, is always going to stay with people and not necessarily machines, but there's a lot that you can do for you.
I can totally relate because one of the things that, I mean, aside from having to use AI for work, I had to use AI to develop whatever I'm doing now with this podcast. Like I just had to learn because everyone is using it, right? So like, just how do I get with a million podcasts out there, like how do I get mine noticed? How do I get
Yes.
mine searchable? SEO. How do you write that?
Yes.
AI.
Yes,
And in the
exactly.
process of doing that, it has to get to know you, right? Because there's this part of you where like, but Mark does it this way with the making your mark brand, right? So like this language, Mark can use, and you get better yourself or I did, because now I learned more through this process of trying to do all that, So
For sure.
I
There's a
definitely
great
recommend
learning
it.
opportunity there. Definitely a great learning opportunity. And I would say that, again, like learning AI, but also focusing a lot on those social skills that AI cannot do, like creativity, analysis, a collaboration, like judgments, like I would say that is extremely important. I talked to many people, last year, and we're still talking about that how can we understand that the AI generated work is good? How can we evaluate it? And then if we don't have that psychological safety to share already our ideas and our, feedback, then what does that mean with the systems that are going to go and stay in the process without any feedback or without any evaluation or without any iteration? So it's really the idea of culture, like your leadership capacity to understand, like change and to lead change. I think it's really important with these AI agents and the machines and everything that's happening in Europe.
One thing that I want to mention before we get to the closing part of this interview, one thing that I do want to comment on is I caught that you said at first you were a bit apprehensive about it, right? AI, but then I also from this interview understand that like it challenged you. Like with the emergence of this thing that's not going away, that is the future.
Yes.
How do I link it to what I'm doing now?
Exactly. Because at the end of the day, you see that this is the reality of people. Again, for me as an entrepreneur, as a consultant, self-employed, whatever you want to call, as a service provider, you constantly looking at your clients. And then you see, oh my goodness, they're overwhelmed. They don't know what to do. They're having these old mindsets. They constantly burnt out because they think they have to have all the answers. Then there's a system that is expecting them unrealistic expectations, asking for change. You're a change expert, like asking for transformation with certainty, no risk, no failure, no mistakes. So then you're just thinking that we like it or not, this is the reality of people. And this is what's happening. And, there are some of our clients that are not necessarily going through AI. They're going through different kind of change. But we are going through the time that it's a changing time. Like geopolitics, I'm Iranian, so obviously, like from like standing point of politics, like to trades, to economics, to like technology. So the constant question for me is that how can we support leaders or people in general to go through this change and to facilitate these transformations and to lead these moments of like, really new realities. And definitely then you cannot ignore the AI we just had finished like a program called Lead Forward. And the first question that I asked all the participants is that what are some of the challenges that you're dealing with, especially when it comes to people? And it's mostly around how can we invite people to embrace AI? How can we integrate AI? How can we, like, this is the reality. So, like, I think you need to just accept it and see how you can work around it and how you can support.
Wonderful. Do you have any overarching advice for the audience, given what you've spoken about today?
Yeah, I think there are a few things. Agency for individuals. I think that, as a professional, just do a lot of soul searching, see what you're good at, what you can leverage, but also what you need to learn. I would say a lot of focus on social skills, human skills. Like, and I understand that this is a hard thing because we don't necessarily have those role models within our systems, but read a lot. Like, just educate yourself about this different future, but also have that excitement to build that. Because I just constantly think that every single one of us, through how we treat each other, through how we build our dynamics, through how we answer a meeting or an email, or how we show up in a meeting, we are changing. We are part of our cultures, and we are changing that. So just have that ownership to really not only build a good career for yourself, but also for everyone around you. I think this is the time for us to take care of each other more than ever as human beings in general. So I guess like building that capacity is extremely important.
And now I'm compelled, but I'm going to ask you, like, so if someone watches this and then feels so compelled to reach out, how do they reach out to you?
I'm on LinkedIn, posting every single day. Also, my website at gleefactor.com. Our YouTube as well is there, Nogol Madani. So you can just listen to all the conversations that I had, all the podcasts that I've been featured in, what you get to see. I think LinkedIn could be the first thing. And I also always have my calendar open for 30-minute conversations with anyone who's excited. Like, I love the idea of connecting to people and hearing their challenges and what they're going through. If there's an opportunity to support them, collaborate, partner with them, so they can also develop.
Well, Nogol, I want to say thank you very much for spending some time with me to talk about your life story, and also teaching me a little bit, or not a little bit, a lot. Actually, I learned a lot just through this hour that we spent together. So I'm hoping that a lot of people watch it and they reach out to you, because I think what you're providing to the world is super valuable and super beneficial. So thank you.
Thank you. We're trying our best, and thank you so much, Mark, for having me, for this invitation, and for this extremely smooth conversation that we had together.
Thank you very much. So for those of you in the audience, thank you very much for watching this, and I hope to see you on the next one as well. Take care.